Have you ever been told you're a liability, not because of something you did, but because of something that happened to you? What if I told you that a crushed hand, a dusty old document, and a company's darkest oversight would eventually lead me to own the land they tried to bury me under? If you stick with me to the end of this story, you'll see how one accident led to a secret worth millions and the kind of revenge they never saw coming. You'll want to watch this through because of the final twist. It changed everything for me, and it just might change how you think about your power in the face of injustice. If you're into storytelling, which shows how the underestimated can rise from the ashes, then hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This isn't just a story about workplace injustice. It's about how I turned their betrayal into a beginning. You're a liability now, Kara. That sentence slapped across the conference room like a door slammed in a quiet hallway. 7 executives stared at me from the polished table, my left hand bandaged and awkward in its compression glove, tucked in my lap like a secret. My right hand rested on the separation documents they'd slid before me. 2 minutes earlier, I'd walked into this room thinking it was a routine recovery check-in. Instead, I was ambushed. The man speaking, Halverson, our operations director, couldn't even look at me as he read the prepared line. The fluorescent lights overhead glinted off his bald spot as if trying to spotlight the shame he couldn't feel. After careful review of your condition, he said, continued employment would pose unacceptable operational risks. My throat dried instantly. The nerve endings in my healing hand pulsed like angry drum beats. "But I'm improving," I murmured. My voice didn't even sound like my own. The doctor said I'd be able to return to light duty within 2 months. A woman I didn't recognize, trim gray suit, cold eyes, legal counsel, apparently, leaned forward like she smelled weakness. "Our legal team reviewed everything. You'll continue to receive workers' comp for the appropriate term, but your position has been eliminated." My heart punched my ribs like it wanted out of my chest. 18 months, 7 surgeries, nights screaming into a pillow from pain so bad it made me nauseous. I went through all of it believing I had something to return to. "I'm Kara Whitman," I wanted to scream. I was a line supervisor at one of the biggest manufacturing plants in Michigan, but I only whispered, "Can I review these papers with someone before I sign?" The legal woman nodded. "You have 7 days, but we'll need you to collect your things now. Security will escort you." Escort? Like I was dangerous. Tanner, the guard who'd known me for 6 years, walked me to my office. He didn't meet my eyes. "Sorry, Kara," he said, voice low. "This is wrong." I looked at him, nearly choking on the heat in my throat. "Do you have to watch me pack?" He hesitated. "I'm supposed to. But I'm thirsty. Think I'll grab a coffee. Might take 15 minutes. Then he walked away. I sank into my chair, breathing hard. For almost 7 years, this place had been my life. I started on the floor straight out of Michigan Tech, hustling through night shifts while my friends chased dreams in other cities. I climbed the ranks because I was damn good. Before the accident, I was the top candidate for production manager. I reached for a cardboard box and started loading it with what little of my life still felt like mine. Photos. A potted succulent from my mom. That chipped coffee mug my team gave me last year with "Boss Lady" in gold letters. I felt the tears coming but shoved them back down. I wouldn't let them win. The bottom drawer, as always, is stuck. I tugged harder than I meant to and it crashed open. Papers spilled out. And then I saw it. Something that had slipped beneath the desk. An old manila folder. Faded label. Familiar handwriting. My heart stuttered. It was my grandfather's. I'd brought some of his old journals to the office years ago. He'd worked for the original version of this company in the 80s, some kind of engineering consultant. When he passed away 3 years ago, I kept his notes, thinking there might be something useful. But I'd barely looked at them. Until now. I opened the folder and saw pages of diagrams, notes in tiny block letters, and soil samples. And then, at the back, a yellowing envelope taped to the cover. Inside was a legal document, a carbon copy, dated 1983, mineral rights retention agreement. I didn't understand at first. Then I saw the address, our exact facility. The document said my grandfather had retained all subsurface mineral rights to the land beneath what would become our main production plant. I stared at it, my injured hand tingling. What was this? Why would he keep this? Why did it feel like a live wire buzzing in my hands? My phone buzzed. Tanner. They're asking where I am. I snapped a photo of the document, stuffed the envelope into my purse, and texted back. Almost done. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the parking lot. The facility I once loved looked more like a graveyard now, but in my purse was a resurrection I didn't see coming. I drove home to my one-bedroom apartment, which I could barely afford on my reduced income, and laid out my grandfather's documents on my kitchen table. The deeper I read, the more my heart raced. His notes were meticulous. He suspected valuable minerals were under the land even back then. Back in the 80s, it was mostly speculation, but now? Rare earth elements have become vital for modern tech. Phones, cars, batteries. He'd left behind something everyone thought was worthless. Except it wasn't. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called a mineral rights attorney, the one I found. Reese took one look at my scanned document and raised an eyebrow. "If this holds up," she said, "and if those minerals are there, you could sit on a gold mine. Literally." But I wasn't interested in gold. I wanted my life back, my voice, my power. And suddenly I had leverage, real leverage. Reese nodded slowly as I told her everything. About the injury, the termination, and the expansion project the company had been bragging about. They were planning to dig deep for a new foundation, possibly disturbing the land I now legally owned. "Then it's time we reminded them," Reese said, "that the land they think they own isn't quite theirs." And just like that, the woman they called a liability became their greatest threat. The next morning, I showed up at Reese's office, holding the original document with both trembling hands. One trembling, one mostly steady. She took it from me like it was sacred, slid on a pair of gloves, and studied every faded line. Then she turned to me and asked, "Do you have any reason to believe this might not be valid?" "No," I said, honestly. My grandfather was meticulous. If he said he owned something, he did. Reese nodded slowly. "Then our first step is to authenticate this document formally and verify that you are the legal heir to his mineral rights. You'll also need to keep this quiet. If the company finds out too soon, they'll bury you in lawsuits." I stared at her. "I thought this was my right." "It is," she said, "but rights don't mean much if the other side has more lawyers and deeper pockets." So began the strangest 3 weeks of my life. By day, I went to therapy, iced my wrist, and struggled to open peanut butter jars. By night, I worked with Reese, gathering probate records, land surveys, and anything to prove this wasn't a fantasy. She brought in a geologist, a quiet guy who wore flannel to our meetings, who confirmed through public data that the area under the plant likely held substantial deposits of neodymium and other rare earth elements. When I asked what that meant, he shrugged. "They're used in magnets, batteries, electric cars. Very high demand right now, very high value." "Ballpark?" I asked. "If it's there," he pulled up a spreadsheet, "around $12.00 to $15 million, 0 cents, based on volume and current prices." I couldn't breathe for a moment. This company fired me for being too broken to lift boxes, and now I might own the most valuable part of their operation. "So," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, "what's our next move?" Reese leaned back in her chair. "We don't just confront them, we give them a choice. They can either cut you in or we bury them in court." I wanted to smile, but my stomach turned. It felt like a dream, and dreams were dangerous. Still, I agreed. We sent a certified letter requesting a meeting with the company's CEO, Damian Crowley. We said it concerned unresolved claims around the expansion project and my termination. We hinted at a potential settlement. Nothing specific, just enough bait to get them in the room. The meeting was set for the following Friday at 2 p.m. Location? The very conference room where they'd fired me. I arrived 10 minutes early. Tanner was at the desk again. He blinked in shock when he saw me. "You're back?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Just for a meeting." He buzzed me in. The halls were half empty now. Equipment had already been cleared out. Stickers marked walls for demolition. Ghosts of my past life clung to every corner. The conference room was unchanged. Polished wood, big windows, fake warmth. Damien was already seated, flanked by Harlan and the same legal woman, Brenda, or something, who'd watched me crumble weeks ago. They barely looked up. "Kara," Damien said, as if saying my name was inconvenient. "We're here about your severance concerns?" "Not quite," I said, and took my seat. Reese sat beside me, the briefcase locked and the face unreadable. "I'm here about your new facility." That got their attention. "Your expansion involves digging deep foundations on land you believe you own. The problem is, you don't. Not fully?" I pulled out the document and slid it across the table. Damien picked it up, glanced at it, then handed it to Brenda. She read it, and then her eyebrows lifted. "This is a mineral rights claim." "Correct," I said. "Filed by my grandfather in 1983. He retained all subsurface mineral rights beneath this facility." Damien scoffed. "This is absurd. Those rights would have reverted to us decades ago." Reese finally spoke. "They didn't. Michigan's dormant mineral rights statute excludes rare earth elements. Those minerals weren't commercially viable back then, so the law protects the original holder's claim." "But your grandfather's estate," Brenda began. Reese cut her off. "We've already validated the probate filings. Kara inherited full control of those rights. And we've confirmed the presence of rare earth minerals under this site. Current market value? Over $13 million. 0 cents. The room went silent. Damien leaned back, steepling his fingers. "So what exactly do you want?" I took a breath. "I want to acknowledge that your safety protocols failed me. I want compensation, beyond the bare minimum workers' comp, reflecting the damage done. And I want a seat at the table, not just to cash in, but to ensure no one else gets discarded like I was." Damien's eyes narrowed. "You think you can leverage this into a job?" "No," I said. "I'm building something bigger than a job, a future you'll need my permission to break ground on." Brenda stood abruptly. "This is extortion." "This is negotiation," Reese replied smoothly. "And you'll want to keep it quiet. Your investors are expecting this project to start next month. How do you think they'll react to a court injunction?" Damien glared at me. "We'll need to consider our options." I stood, collected my papers, and nodded. "You have until Monday." As we left, I could feel their eyes on my back. But for once, I wasn't afraid. I was the storm knocking on their door. They thought I'd bluff. They thought I'd fold. But by Monday, the threats started, and not just legal ones. The closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. The first sign came Sunday night, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You should take their offer before it disappears." No name, no context, just that. I stared at it a while, wondering if it was a prank. Then came the email flood, a dozen messages from anonymous addresses, some cryptic, some aggressive. The next morning, my mom called in a panic. "Someone from your company left a voicemail on our landline, asking questions about your grandfather's estate. They wanted to know if he had any business partnerships." That's when I knew they were scared. Scared enough to dig into my family history. Scared enough to try intimidation. But I wasn't backing down. Reese brought a digital security specialist named West. Tattooed arms, laptop covered in stickers, eyes sharp as razors. He swept my apartment for bugs, set up encrypted communications, and locked down my email. "They're trying to rattle you," he said. "That means they know you're legit." At noon, their assistant called. The CEO wanted a new meeting at their downtown corporate office. Neutral ground, Reese muttered. They're trying to shift power back. I didn't care where we met. I just wanted it over. That afternoon, we arrived at a conference room with floor-to-ceiling views of Detroit's skyline. The table gleamed like obsidian. Bryn was again, this time joined by another man. Silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of guy who didn't speak unless it was to close a deal or bury a body in legalese. "Mr. Whitman," he said smoothly, "I'm Anthony Thorne, General Counsel. I've reviewed your claim." His voice was calm, too calm. "While the document you provided appears genuine, we've identified 3 key issues." He slid a portfolio across the table. "First, the property was rezoned in 1998. Second, mineral rights in Michigan revert to surface owners after 20 years if not exercised. Third, your grandfather's estate didn't list these rights as an asset." He leaned back, hands folded. "That makes your claim highly questionable." I felt my stomach tighten. But Reese just opened her briefcase. "Let's address those in reverse," she said. 1. The rights were added in an amended probate filing. Here's the record. 2. Rare earth elements are exempt from the reversion clause under Michigan law due to delayed viability. And 3, she pulled out a county map. The rezoning explicitly preserved existing mineral rights agreements. Page 47. Thorne's smile flickered. Just a blink, but I saw it. We'd out-prepared them. Damien cleared his throat. "Despite the legal complexities, we're prepared to offer you a consulting contract. $150,000, 0 cents annually, 2 years guaranteed. In exchange, you sign a release waiving all claims." I stared at him. $300,000 for minerals worth $13 million? "It's generous," Bryn snapped. "And you'd be wise to take it." I opened my mouth to reply, but then the door opened again. A tall woman strode in, gray buzz cut, sharp black suit, and a stare that could burn through steel. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the seat beside Reese. "I'm Lena Mason, Mineral Rights Counsel." Thorne stiffened. He knew the name. Everyone in the room did. She smiled. "Let's talk about what happens next." Lena moved fast. She countered every point they raised. The zoning issue? Misread. The reversion clause? Not applicable. The asset listing? Properly filed. Your only move is litigation, she concluded, which will delay your project, cost you millions, and likely fail. Or you work with Miss Whitman. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the board members, a woman named Valencia, cleared her throat. "What would working together look like?" Lena glanced at me. I took a breath. "A joint venture. You extract the minerals, I get a majority share, 60%. Outrage erupted. Damien called it robbery. Bryn called it blackmail. But Valenci held up her hand. "Let's be real. This is salvageable. The question is, do we fight her, or do we make money together?" Reese leaned in. "If you choose cooperation, Ms. Whitman also has conditions." I nodded. "First, a public acknowledgement that your safety protocols failed and contributed to my injury. Second, compensation covers my medical costs and career loss. And third, a seat on the board's Worker Safety Committee, with voting rights." Damien practically spat his water. "Not. But Valencia," she was listening. "Shareholders have been pressuring us to include someone with floor experience. This could be symbolic." They whispered among themselves for a while. When they returned, they didn't accept everything, but they didn't reject it either. They wanted to run the numbers, verify the surveys, and review terms. "You'll hear from us in 48 hours, Thorne said. As we stood to leave, Damien stepped close to me. "Enjoy your moment," he whispered, "but remember who you're playing with." I looked him dead in the eye. "Oh, I remember. That's why I'm recording this conversation." I held up my phone, blinking red in my pocket. He froze, just for a second, but it was enough. I walked out of that glass tower, taller than I had in months. The deal was on the table, but so was danger. Because people like Damien don't go quietly, and by the end of that week, someone was following me. If you've made it this far, now's a good time to show some love. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next. 2 nights after that last meeting, I noticed the same SUV circling my block twice before pulling off. The next morning, my neighbor told me someone had been asking questions about me. Some guy in a dark coat said he was from a real estate firm. When I asked which firm, she said he never gave a name. I forwarded all of it to Reese and Lena. They told me to stay alert, not paranoid. But I wasn't just alert, I was furious. The company hadn't said a word in those 48 hours, and on the morning of day 3, my inbox pinged. The subject line read, "Meeting request, revised offer." It was from Valencia. They wanted to meet again, this time in a private conference space at a hotel outside the city. Reese didn't like it. "Why the change in venue?" she asked. "They're trying to unbalance you again." "Let them try," I said. "I'm done being scared." The room was sleek. Neutral tones, minimalist decor, and water pitchers set at every seat like it was a wellness retreat and not a legal ambush. Damien was already there, flanked by Bryn and Thorne again. But something had changed. Thorne looked tired, Bryn looked tense, and Damien, he looked cornered. "We've reviewed your terms," he said, "and we're prepared to move forward with a joint venture." I didn't speak, I waited. 60-40 split in your favor. You'll receive a board seat on the safety committee, and we'll issue a formal statement acknowledging the failure of internal safety checks during your incident. "Not good enough," I said. Damien blinked. "Excuse me?" "The acknowledgement needs to name me, and I want a say in how it's worded. I won't accept some sanitized PR line." Valencia, seated beside him again, nodded. "Agreed." She turned to Thorne. "We can work with that." Then Bryn spoke up. "There's still the matter of confidentiality. We'd require a strict NDA regarding the mineral rights agreement, all meetings and settlement terms." "That's fine," Reese said, "as long as it doesn't restrict her from talking about her accident and her advocacy." Bryn frowned. "That's not acceptable." "Then we don't have a deal," I said. "I don't need to tell people how much money I made, but I will not be silenced about how you treated me after my injury." The silence stretched. Thorne scribbled something. Damien looked like he'd swallowed something sour. "Fine," he finally said. "We'll carve out an exception." The contracts were drawn up over the next 4 hours. I reviewed every clause. Reese flagged the tricky language. Lena highlighted potential loopholes. We closed the deal that evening. The joint venture was real. They were going to extract the minerals during construction, using specialized teams and overseen by a third-party engineering firm. I would receive 60% of net proceeds with an initial advance of $2 million, 0 cents. But more than the money, I had something they couldn't buy back. Their silence. I had a voice again, and I intended to use it. Within 2 weeks, I gave my first public statement. It was short, direct, and released through my lawyer's office. I told the truth about my accident, about being discarded, and about how I fought back using the only thing they respected: leverage. Then, I joined my first safety committee meeting. At that table, I was no longer Kara, the injured worker. I was Kara, the stakeholder. I brought data, patterns of missed maintenance logs, gaps in overnight training. I didn't accuse, I presented. They couldn't argue with facts, and changes began. Monthly safety audits, anonymous feedback lines. A new role was created to oversee shift transitions, especially during high-volume orders. Within 3 months, injuries dropped 40%. Within 62%, I got letters from line workers who didn't know me personally, thanking me for making someone finally listen. That meant more than any payout. The mineral extraction moved ahead as planned, and just like the surveys had suggested, the rare earth deposits were richer than expected. By the end of the first extraction phase, my earnings surpassed $6 million, 0 cents. By the end of the second, over $10 million, 0 cents. I paid off my debts, bought a one-level home outside Ann Arbor with smart home features for my hand, donated $500 0 cents K to a non-profit that provides therapy for injured workers. But I never left the committee. I stayed, because the most satisfying part wasn't winning. It was building something from the ashes they thought I'd choke on. And yet, not everything was healed. My left hand still ached. Some mornings I couldn't even hold a coffee mug without feeling a stabbing burn. The nerves weren't coming back. Not all of them. I still couldn't feel 2 fingers. But when I looked in the mirror now, I didn't see weakness. I saw the fight. I saw someone they couldn't erase. They gave me a seat at the table, yes, but power isn't always safe, because soon I discovered that someone inside the company never wanted this joint venture to happen at all. Just as I started settling into my new reality, something changed again, but this time the threat didn't come from boardrooms or attorneys, it came from the inside. One Friday morning, I arrived early for our safety subcommittee meeting. The office hallways were unusually quiet. As I passed the break room, I overheard 2 engineers whispering, "They're pushing it forward." Without permits, who do you think greenlit it? Thorns involved. It's buried deep. They froze when they saw me. I smiled. Morning. But inside, alarm bells rang. After the meeting, I pulled Valencia aside. Anything happening with the facility outside our scheduled extraction timeline? She hesitated. Why? Because I heard chatter, unusual chatter, and if they're trying to bypass the joint venture... I'll look into it, she said, but I could tell she already knew something. That night, I called Lena and Reese. We met at Lena's office, pulling maps and schedules back up. Sure enough, there was a supplemental drilling permit filed under a shell company that was approved for testing right beneath our extraction zone. It's an end run, Lena said. They're hoping to extract minerals through this company, cut you out, and claim they weren't part of the original deal. My hands shook with rage. So, after all of this, they're still trying to cheat me? People like Damien don't believe they lose, Reese muttered. They just think the game isn't over yet. We filed an emergency injunction. The judge granted a temporary halt on all unauthorized drilling. It was a win, but one that revealed just how deep the company's tactics went. Public pressure mounted when the press caught wind. A whistleblower from the engineering team leaked documents proving the unauthorized project was approved at the highest level. Headlines followed. Injured worker battles corporate giant, again. Investors got spooked. Stock dipped. Damien was forced to issue a public statement denying involvement, while Thorne quietly resigned. But I wasn't done. I pushed for an internal audit of the company's safety and compliance protocols. The board, desperate to restore public trust, agreed. We found decades of cut corners, quiet settlements, and ignored warnings. In just 3 months, we rewrote the company's rulebook, and I made sure no future Kiras would ever feel powerless again. Looking back now, a year later, I still feel the sting in my hand sometimes. I still can't tie certain knots or open a stubborn jar. But I also look at the framed document in my home office, the mineral rights agreement my grandfather left me, and I smile. He must have known someday it would matter. He couldn't have predicted what happened to me, but he planted the seed of my comeback decades before I needed it. Today, I consult several manufacturers on safety innovation. I invest in startups led by women engineers. I mentor young workers entering tough industries, reminding them that they have power, even when the system pretends they don't. And now, I'm sharing this story with you not for sympathy, not even for applause, but because I know someone out there needs to hear it. You might be in a place right now where you feel discarded. For example, your value is tied to what you can lift, produce, and perform. But let me tell you, your value is intrinsic, unshakable. Don't ever let someone in a suit tell you otherwise. My revenge wasn't about money. It wasn't about revenge at all. It was about reclaiming my identity and my dignity, and using what they tried to bury me with as the foundation for my rise. They tried to reduce me to a liability, but I turned myself into their greatest asset. And I didn't do it by playing their game. I rewrote the rules. If this story meant something to you, I ask just one thing: share it. Share it with someone who's struggling, someone who thinks their story is over, because it's not. It never is. And if you've ever been in my shoes, discarded, underestimated, then you already know. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better. After suffering a brutal injury on the job, Kara was discarded by the company she gave everything to. But a forgotten folder from her late grandfather revealed a hidden mineral rights agreement that changed everything. Armed with legal firepower and unshakable resolve, she flipped the power dynamic, took control of a multi-million-dollar venture, and transformed herself from a discarded worker into a boardroom force. If you were in Kara's position, what would you have done? Fought quietly for a settlement and walked away? Stood your ground and demanded systemic change from within? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone. And remember, the real revenge isn't about payback. It's about proving they were wrong to underestimate you.